Are you in a position where you're defined by your age, and that's limiting you to pursue a dream or goal you want to accomplish? The More Than Your Age podcast is about having conversations with women who fully live their lives without being dictated or defined by their age. This is a space to encourage women who feel blocked to pursue a dream or goal based on their life circumstances. Welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast. I am your host, Erica Pasbar. Let's start living life fully and become more than your age. I've been seeing so many people share online how they have been reinventing themselves and recognizing that they truly can chase after a life they desire regardless of age. I happened to stumble upon a quote via social media that said, I'm going to read this to you. In my 40s, I got divorced, changed careers, launched my own business, lost 75 pounds, and built my most confident body. Stop telling yourself it's too late when it could just be the beginning. Of course, as you know, as soon as I saw this, I read this, I knew I had to contact the writer. And so I did, and I learned so much more of her past and how she truly is an example of someone who is more than her age. I asked her to be a guest on the show, and here we are. From a Cornell grad to director of HR at 27 years old, to even fancier titles and greater paychecks, to realizing it just wasn't worth it, throwing it all away to chase after a life she truly desires. Welcome to episode 79 of the More Than Your Age podcast with Lauren Melton. I can't wait for you to hear her story. Enjoy the show. Joining me on the More Than Your Age podcast is wellness and nutrition coach and founder of This Life Uncluttered, Lauren Melton. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, Erica.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you here, Lauren. I appreciate you joining me, and I've been looking forward to our conversation. I kind of want to share with the listeners how you and I got connected. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that I saw a comment that you had responded to. Was it on Threads?
It was, and it's funny because it's the only kind of, I'll call it slightly viral thread I've ever had. And that's how we got connected.
Yeah, it's so neat. I've been enjoying Threads too, because I've just been getting connected with different people that I wouldn't have. And so based on what you said, I thought, okay, she sounds very interesting. And so we connected, and then obviously here we are. So Lauren, you were a very highly successful woman in corporate for many, many years. You quickly made it up the ranks at a very young age, which is very impressive, and also studied hospitality management at Cornell, also impressive. And then side note, every time I see Cornell, did you ever watch The Office?
Of course, Andy Bernard. Yeah.
Yes. He's like, you're stable, but you don't want to claim him.
I mean, there's so much accuracy in his character. I will just leave it at that.
Really? So funny. So anytime I read or see Cornell, I always think about Andy. Anyway, that's just a side note. So I want to know for you, what was it like for you growing up to have this push towards being such a high achiever?
Yeah. So I grew up in pretty typical kind of a little above middle class, upper middle class family in, outside New York City and Connecticut in Fairfield County. And I'm the youngest of three girls, and I have two older sisters. And there's quite a big age gap between them. So I always joke by the time I came around, my parents were almost done with a lot of the parenting parts, and that they were great parents. It was mostly just, they had older kids at that point. So I was pretty self-sufficient at a really early age. And this is in the 80s growing up, and my mother worked full time. And then where we grew up, that was not the norm. She was the only woman mom in the neighborhood who did that. And so because of that, yeah, it just meant I was packing my own lunch for school in elementary school. I was, I wouldn't call myself a latchkey kid, but I definitely had my own key and was letting myself in after school, and all those things that just had to happen because my mom had a pretty demanding job, and my dad as well. And my sisters were older. So it just was kind of the expectation of this is just what's expected of us. And in terms of like on the academic side and sports and activities, there was never like an immense amount of pressure from my parents in terms of like, oh, this is what's expected. But it was just it was like this underlying tone of like, oh no, yeah, you are an achiever. Like you will be an achiever. And that's what we all three of us were. So there was a little bit, I will say, of the like, pressure to be more of the good girl. So don't like bring too much attention to yourself, be the good girl and be well behaved. And all three of us pretty much were. So yeah, so I mean, I definitely, as in school and sports and activities and whatnot, I just continue to do. I was a doer and just continue to like do a lot of activity and have achievements come out of that as well.
So your degree is in hospitality management, and you made your way into HR. So how did that happen? And then how did you get up the ranks pretty quickly?
Yeah. So first of all, the hotel school at Cornell is such a unique, small school. And I just fell into it. I was applying to a bunch of different universities. I was considering playing volleyball at college. And so that factored into where I was looking. And with that, I kind of just applied to the programs that seemed most interesting. That was my criteria. I was like, what's most interesting? So like George Washington, I was like, oh, international relations, because that's in DC, right? Or so that was how I approached it. And at Cornell, I was like, seemed like a little bit of a long shot. I will be honest. I was always a good student. I had great grades. I didn't have great SAT. I had good SATs, not good enough to get into Cornell, like, engineering program. But when I looked at Cornell, I fell in love with the campus and then the hotel school. And really, it's just a great business program. So I got a really great undergraduate business degree with an emphasis on, it has, a lot of courses around like hospitality management. But the way I fell into HR, my first summer, one of the best things about Cornell is, or the hotel school, is they emphasize work experience immediately. Like immediately get internships, get work experience, which is great because you'll quickly realize, do I actually want to do this? Is this what I enjoy? And create network and relationships for post-graduation. So my freshman year, my hometown in Waltham, Massachusetts at the time, I went to the Westin Hotel and went into the HR director's office and applied, like, on paper. That's how I used to do applications. And said, are you looking for an HR? Or are you looking for an intern? And he said, maybe, sure. Like, what are you interested in? And I said, any department. And he said, have you ever considered HR? And that's how I fell into HR. And to this day, he's still a great mentor and friend in my life, which has been phenomenal. And I did realize that HR really suited me well. And I spent the first 15 years of my career in it and the first part in hospitality. And it's a tough industry, especially from an HR perspective. It's, and I joke that any industry that's surrounded by beds and booze, like you're going to have like a plethora of employee relations issues. So I quickly got right into that right out of college and, kind of just worked my way up, and getting into some really difficult, like hotels and more challenging positions to be able to kind of prove myself. And by 27, I was the director of HR of one of the hotels. I was out in San Diego at the.
Yeah, that's really impressive to be able to get to that position at such a young age. When you were, I guess, moving up the ranks or applying for higher positions, were you going up against other people who were a lot older than you or about the same age? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it depended on the situation. So yes and no. Sometimes, in the beginning, it was more like planned out. So I started as like a coordinator, and the hotel company I was with at the time, it was Four Seasons. They were really great about having like career paths. And so they actually would like spell out, okay, this is what you're going to do for the next, 1 or 2 years. And then we're going to work towards this role. And so that was kind of just like built out. It wasn't like I was competing with anyone else for a role. They were really good about like just tracking everybody in that manner. Then I switched hotel companies and I was with a company that was called Starwood. Now it's part of Marriott, which is a huge hotel company. And that was a little different. So that was, yes, you would be applying and be up against other people potentially. I think the thing that, in terms of like, what kind of helped me get to that position that quickly was I worked all the time. Like, this is not what you want to hear, right? Like when
Yeah.
people are like, well, how did you get there? Like I worked all the time. I mean, I was in my early 20s and I was working 80-hour weeks and I didn't have a family. And so I could do that. And that's basically what I did. And so I was there all the time. I was getting more experience from being there and was basically able to just help out with whatever was needed. And they knew I was there. They knew I was reliable and I'd proven myself to be able to handle some really difficult positions. And it was funny because I moved from New York City to San Diego. and for a job opportunity. And it was from someone that I had interned for as well in college, just all the relationships, right? And who you get to meet. And I'd never been to California. I am a typical East Coaster. I was born and raised in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and I ended up in New York City out of college, and I worked for 4 seasons. So we had to wear suits with like the jacket had to match the pants. At the front desk, the ladies had to wear skirts with nylons. Like this is, we're talking like, yeah, very conservative, and my pearls. And then I moved to San Diego and I worked for a hotel. It was a W hotel at the time. It's now a different hotel, but, and it was, I don't know if you know W hotels, but they're totally different, right? This is like trendy and they're all models. It's beautiful. And, had just opened like a year or two before I got there. And so it was in the very peak of its prime. Like they had a rooftop bar with a like sandbar, and they had a line wrapped around the building. And so I went from this like super conservative, really conservative hotel company to now this like kind of party scene. And I'd show up in my suit and my pearls, and I just laugh about it so much to this day because I remember there was like a woman who walked into the HR office and she had like leather short Daisy Dukes and fishnet stockings. And I remember saying after she left, to the director, I was like, oh, I wonder where she was coming from before work. And she said, Lauren, that's her uniform. She worked in the bar. That was her bartender uniform. So it was like a whole new world. But anyway, being exposed to that, I had to just deal with I was having to like deal with employee investigations and like drug testing employees because they were like drunk or high on the job, or, just dealing with like a lot of different labor relations and union issues, and also just helping the employee relations. And I got my hands in a lot of things. And so they saw me as useful and impactful and kind of gave me opportunities as they came up. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to be in a role of leading a, small team of HR individuals at a hotel by 27.
Yeah. Well, okay. I have more questions with that. So because at 27, you're youthful and you're dealing with, like you said, employee relations and employees making poor decisions on the job. And when you would have these conversations, these crucial conversations with these employees, would you find that they would respect you, or would they not because of your age? Or how was your experience with that?
Oh my gosh, so many stories. I mean, one, I will say, as much as I was in my youth as well, right? And I was probably making just as many poor decisions, but like outside of work. So I probably just had the understanding of knowing how to like have boundaries with that and not have that overlap as much. But yes, I mean, I remember several times where, hospitality, you get sweaty, like, right? You're moving around and having to tell, 60-year-old banquet server that his body odor was, not, was a challenge. And like, how do you navigate that lightly? And that's difficult. And, he was coming from a second job. So it's not that this person doesn't shower, didn't understand that he needed to. He was working a day shift at one hotel, coming to the second shift. And so having the empathy to understand, like, how do I have this conversation with someone who's literally 40 plus years older than me, right? And then two, to like make them feel comfortable in that and come up with a solution so that they can know it's not me just saying like, you can't stink at work, but to say like, hey, how can we set up like an opportunity for you to like, can we do, there were locker rooms and showers and one, make sure they had an opportunity to do that before his next shift started. But yeah, I mean, things like that constantly, some really awkward conversations. So I had to get really skilled at feeling comfortable in very uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, those conversations can be very, very tricky. So, okay, so let's kind of move forward just a little bit. So you make this pivot into, you're in hospitality, you're in HR, but you pivot from hospitality over to startups after at first we have no kids and then now you have kids. And I'm curious to know, because you were working 80 plus hours after having your kids, what did the daily work life look like for you with your commutes that you had and then taking care of your kids?
Yeah. So everything changed pretty drastically in many ways. So we moved back. I was married at the time. We moved back to East to Boston. And then my husband at the time, was a full-time student. And then he ended up becoming a teacher. So we all kind of there was a lot going on. And in that, he also had a period of time actually where he was traveling a lot for work before he became a teacher. And in that time period, I had my two sons. And when I had my second son, I kind of took a step back and I was like, whoa. He was traveling like all over the world actually for his job. He was for weeks at a time. And it was really challenging for me to be able to keep up commuting into Boston, which even though it's only 7 miles, takes about an hour. Still, it still does. Even with people working remotely after COVID, it's amazing. So that rushing to daycare, that like, oh my gosh, I have to get to the daycare pickup by 5 o'clock and I'm going to get charged or 6 o'clock, whatever time it closed, charged before if I don't get there in time. It was a lot. So we had made a just kind of family decision that I was going to take some time off. And so I had my second son and the plan was Lauren's going to take a year off and then we'll kind of see. Well, 6 months into me taking time off, being at home is harder than working, I feel like, in many ways. And with a husband at the time who was gone for weeks on end, and it kind of came to a head where when my newborn, well, he was about 3 months old, and my other son was barely two, and their dad was away for 3 months and for a long extended trip out of the country. And I was just like, I need something. I need something. And so I just started, I was probably like breastfeeding in the middle of the night with my phone and looking at jobs, right? Like, I wrote, okay, what jobs are out there? And I knew it was not hospitality. The hours, like all these industries that are 24/7, even if your job, HR isn't like, I wasn't going in on Saturdays and Sundays. I was sure as heck still getting called on Saturdays and Sundays over issues and things. And, it's just one that like an industry that never closes is very challenging, to be a working mom in, to be honest. And I knew I kind of wanted to do something different. So I just LinkedIn, just looking at jobs, and I saw a part-time job. It was for like a sound masking distributor company. I didn't even know what that meant. But it looked good. It was 25 hours a week. It was in my town and I just applied. I went in and I was going to be reported as a small company and it was their first time. They were looking for someone to build out, the HR function. They didn't have one. They were, starting from the ground up. And I really credit the woman I reported to, who was the controller at the time. She then got promoted and became the CFO over time, for just taking a shot on me, because I will say there's a lot of stigma around the hospitality industry. It's similar to like kind of retail and some other ones where it's almost looked down upon compared to other industries, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, because the skills that you need to be effective in that industry help you in all aspects of your life and are skills that I've seen like doctors, surgeons, lawyers, and people not be able to ever be able to be successful at. So it's a shame that that's the case, but it's the case. And so a lot of times people tend to kind of look down on that industry a bit. So I wasn't sure, but she took a chance on me, and that role quickly grew into a full-time role within 6 months. They quickly made me the director and put me on the leadership team, and we started growing that company. And it was awesome. I loved it. That's where I realized like, this kind of startup-y space. And they weren't technically a startup. They'd been around for a while, but they were in this rapid growth phase, kind of like a startup would feel. And it was awesome. And so I helped kind of grow that company. And then I had another opportunity to do that 2 more times with other startups where we're in the software space, which was fantastic, and helped them kind of get to the point, all three of these companies, where I helped them grow the HR team, build out the function. Really, if these fast growing startups, like it's all about the employee relations and making sure that these employees, they could go work anywhere, right? Like it's engineers, software engineers, sales executives. So making sure this is the place that they really feel really good about the mission and what we're doing, and help, they feel really rewarded. So yes, I did that 3 times, at 3 different organizations. And it was awesome, but it also was a lot of work. Also a lot of work. And like you said, new mom and trying to navigate daycare pickup, trying to feel fully present with the kids, trying to feel fully present at work, and felt this constant pull that I was like failing at both at the same time. That even though I knew I wasn't, right? I was kept getting promotions. I kept getting big bonuses. I kept getting raises. Like my kids were growing and developing and turning into these awesome individuals. But I still felt like it was a constant struggle between the two. And it never, in that phase that when I was in it, it felt so hard.
It's so interesting because I feel like, I'll hear from women on, women who are working outside of the home full time. And there's this pull of like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough, or am I present enough, or am I, you like have this pool for work. And then you hear women who are home full time with the kids. And then there's this pool of, am I providing financially for my family? And maybe some that are doing half and half. And like, I just feel like that's just a common thread of women who are mothers of just saying, I don't even know if am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? In your case, before kids, you were working a ton, and then you had your second, and then you kind of scaled back, and then you're like, okay, I got to get a job. I got to get back in and start working. And so you did the part-time, and then it increased to the full-time. And then you said 3 other companies as well. And so now we're flash forward to these 3 other companies, and you're very successful, and you have this pool of, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? When did this pool like really nudge at you to where you said, I really need to make a change because this is affecting more in my life than I really want?
Yeah. So it was in my mid 30s. So almost about a decade ago now. And had my kids were like toddler age, so it was, um, it was knee pain. It started out with knee pain. So I'd be pushing them in the stroller and my knee would swell. Well, that's odd. But, and then I would start with them, went to my back and my hip. And I started just having constant pain. And I'm like, well, I'm not even 35 yet. And like, what's going on here? Like, is this what the next like 40, 50 years of my life? Like, how is this what it's going to be like? And, so my like wellness journey or weight loss journey, it didn't start out with me being like, oh my gosh, I'm so overweight. And I feel so uncomfortable in my body. Now, I felt uncomfortable in my body because I was in pain, but I'm 5'11". I'm tall. So I can carry weight and it didn't like show as much. I definitely noticed it, right? Like when I was in a bathing suit but it wasn't like anyone would look at me and be like, oh wow, Lauren may have some health issues because of her weight. But I did have health issues because of my weight. And I went on this whole multiple year journey of trying to figure out where the knee pain was from, and started out with going to my primary care doctor. And she said, oh, you pronate your feet. Maybe we should have you go to the podiatrist. Okay. Went to the podiatrist. $400 later, custom made orthotics. Bought all the old lady shoes you can buy, I didn't wear heels anyways because I'm so tall, but and guess what? The knee was still swelling for no reason. Okay. Well, that's weird. All right, well, let's have you do some PT. I did like over a year of PT twice a week. And they said, okay, well, let's build up some strength in your hips and thighs. Now, you can't see me on here, but I am very pear shaped. And if there's anywhere in my body that I have strength, it's in my hips and thighs. But I said, okay, let's do it. So I did the PT. They said, I don't know, right? It's still swelling. Who knows? So then I went to the doctor said, all right, let's go to the orthopedic knee surgeon. And I went to him. They did an MRI. They noticed I had some early arthritis, but no tears, no nothing. He said, would you like a cortisone shot? And I was like, no. I don't. And then finally I realized like, I think I need to lose some weight. Like, I think I have extra weight I'm carrying around, and that might be, and my doctor kind of suggested that too. And so that's what started my journey. And I also kind of started seeing an acupuncturist in the meantime. And it was so funny. All these doctors, all these specialists are only looking at one little piece of you. And he was the first person to kind of look at all of me and be like, I feel like your hip isn't aligned. This could be from childbirth, but like that may be causing some of these challenges in your knee and your hip. Well, that was like, he didn't solve it, but that was the first person to be like, oh, wow, there is something here. It is, my extra weight I'm carrying around. And, after having kids, this all is kind of like making sense. So anyway, that's what like started my journey and kind of kicked off. And it was very messy, like super messy at first. I did all the things like trying to restrict calories, but then I was still drinking alcohol and trying to, do like beach body programs, but I wasn't really actually lifting any weights. And just like trying to do all this cardio. I got a Peloton when they first came out. Actually, it's right behind me here. And
Not sponsored.
no, yeah, I still love my Peloton, but I thought doing that 6-7 days a week was the answer. That wasn't the answer. Just kind of like trying to just do a bunch of stuff. Like I'd always done. I'm a doer, like just go do stuff. And it worked. Like I started losing some weight, but it definitely wasn't sustainable. Like it wasn't what was actually going to drive me to feel like, how do I do this? Right? Like I'm already having a hard time feeling like I'm failing at work and home. I already feel like my body's failing me. I almost like I had to hit this like breaking point of feeling like something has to change with my day-to-day life so that I can be able to show up and be present in these places. Because right now back then, I wasn't actually present. I was just doing a lot of stuff. And I recently have been hearing about this like reference to like rocking horse syndrome. So like, if you picture this rocking horse, right? And like going back and forth, you're taking a lot of action, you're doing a lot of stuff, it's just not actually getting you anywhere because the things you're doing aren't actually driving those results. So it was messy. It was messy along the way. And then finally, where I realized it needed to focus was simplifying my life. Like I had to unclutter it, like, play on decluttering, but uncluttering my life. And when the pandemic hit, and I'm running an HR team, was about to get acquired, this organization, and helping them transition with that, and trying to like figure out all this chaos of what that meant for the company and the kids and Zoom school and all of that. I don't know why, but I just was like, I feel like I need a creative outlet. And I started an Instagram page for fun. And I just called it This Life Uncluttered, because it was about like how I'm going to unclutter my life and what that looks like. And so I did. And I started just sharing stories about all the things I was doing to help unclutter my life and to like make it simple, from physical clutter to mental clutter, from how I approached my schedule, all these things I was going to do. And the whole point of it was I had to have less decisions to make every day. And I just started sharing it, and it kind of just grew, and people seemed to be enjoying it. And at first it was a lot more on kind of the physical aspect of like the home and having my environment set me up for success. But then I started sharing my workouts and my mornings and my, what that looked like. And then people were kind of asking a lot of questions, and were in my DMs and asking me about like fitness and nutrition and that. And I was feeling gravitated towards like excited to talk to them about it and support them on it. And I almost was doing a little bit of like free coaching in the DMs, even though I wasn't a coach yet. And it was kind of around that time that my company was, getting acquired, that I was trying to figure out like what's next for me. And I started interviewing with a bunch of companies, and these were big roles. Like this is my first time they were like big roles, like CPO, which that's going to be a chief people officer, right? And one of them was at a publicly traded company. Some of these, they were like big roles, big money, right? And these recruiters probably hated me because I would go to it, I was all Zoomed up then because it was pandemic, but I would do it, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if this one's for me. Like go to another one. I'm not sure. I'm feeling this one. And it was around that time that I realized like I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore. I just didn't have that same. I realized all the success I had in my career for those first, however, 20, almost 20 years was doing. Like I was doing it and I was getting rewarded by doing, but it wasn't because I was actually like doing something that I truly like really enjoyed. It was something that like was giving me new titles and new money and new promotions, but the actual work itself didn't feel as rewarding and fulfilling as I felt kind of while I was helping women figure out how to improve their wellness. So that's kind of what was the start of like the transition.
Hey, listeners. If you love the More Than Your Age podcast and want to help us keep bringing inspiring stories your way, here is a simple way to support this show. Check out our affiliate links for skincare products we love, language learning we love. Not only will you get products that help you feel great, but every purchase helps us keep this podcast going. You'll find the links in the show notes. Thank you for being part of our community and supporting the journey. Back to the show. Okay. I have so many things to ask you just in that nugget of everything you just shared. So the first thing I want to ask you to go back to when you were working, and it was like, okay, I had this knee pain and I had this back pain, and then you go to all these doctors, and then you find this acupuncturist, and he's like, let's check a look at the hip, and then you realize, okay, it's, it has to do with the weight. And previously, was it because you said because you were tall, you couldn't really tell? Was that just kind of your like whole life? Was that you maybe had a little extra weight, but it wasn't enough to make to be very noticeable?
Yeah. So I was never a skinny girl growing up. I was always, tall. I was always kind of like big Lauren, but I wasn't overweight as a kid. I was athletic and, tall. And then in college, and I was never thin. I was more like, average, but I didn't carry around like excess, an excessive amount of weight. But then, I wasn't like really taking care of myself properly, definitely in my 20s for sure. I was definitely drinking a lot of alcohol and eating whatever I wanted to eat. It wasn't something I was really, and then every once in a while I would think about it and I would do like, oh, maybe I should do one of these lemon juice kind cleanses for a week, one of those kind of things, right? So it was kind of haphazard, I would say. And then when I had my kids, I actually, wasn't at my largest after having my kids. It was like probably 2 years after having my second son when I was kind of at the peak of kind of my HR. Well, not, I wouldn't say peak, but my HR career was definitely like rolling in the startups, and feeling this constant pull between work and home and all of it. That my activity level weren't like this, right? This is a lot of times women think, oh, I can't, my metabolism isn't the same in my 30s and 40s, but really what it is we now have jobs where we sit all day. And when we were in our 20s or, in college, we were walking around campuses all day. We were like so much more active in general. So what I did, I sat all day for work. I sat in a car 2 hours a day, commuting in and out of work. So my body was so sedentary that my hip wasn't used to moving in the same direction it used to. So now that's probably what was causing part of the issue. I was just very sedentary and I wasn't really paying attention to what I was eating and I was drinking. And so it was a combination of just all of that, I did start putting on weight. And so I put on, I still like, I was definitely probably up to like 75 pounds or more heavier than what I, am right now. But I definitely am probably lower now than what I was in my 20s. So it's hard to say. And also I hate talking just weight because like muscle is such a big part of it. Like I was probably super under muscled. So I didn't have a lot of muscle to support my activity or my day-to-day life. And that was probably a lot of the issue causing a lot of the pain as well. So.
Gotcha. I like your perspective too of where women will say, oh, it's harder to lose weight or be more fit in your 30s and 40s, but really you're not as active as you once were. So I think that's a good perspective. You also said too that you gave the rocking horse analogy of like you're doing something, but you're not getting anywhere. At what point did you realize, because you're doing Beachbody, you're doing all these things. So when did that shift happen where you said, okay, no, this is like nothing is working here? How did you figure out what to do that actually did work?
Yeah. And I shouldn't say nothing worked because things were working, but it felt really hard. Like I felt like I had to cut out carbs and I had to intermittent fast and do all these approaches that, they felt like, is this how I'm going to live the rest of my life? And that's why I always say there's nothing wrong with any of these approaches if you plan to do them the rest of your life. Like that's the key everyone thinks there's some secret, right, to weight loss and weight management, but it's not really a secret. It's really like just making a system that works for you that you're going to keep doing the rest of your life. But those systems, they didn't work for me to be able to maintain because on the weekend I would then want to drink alcohol. And guess what? Alcohol is a carb. So I was eating carbs. I was drinking them. And so it finally got to the point where I was like, I needed to learn something else. And so I did learn about macro counting and macronutrition and basically prioritizing a balanced approach with protein, healthy fats, fiber. Basically, it's a balanced approach to nutrition instead of it being like, I'm going to restrict all week and then weekends being like a party. It was more like, I'm just going to change how I eat all the time. And so that started to feel a lot lighter. And then I had to like simplify my approach to that. I had to make meals really easy so they could be repeatable. And so that I wasn't stressed out by how I was going to feed the kids and myself and kind of come up with these basic strategies for my meal planning and weekly routine so that it just kind of happened on autopilot. That's a big piece of what I like cover and teach to my clients is about that piece of uncluttering your life is coming up with strategies that they just become part of who you are. And it's like a ritual. And then the workout piece, pandemic hit, I was scrolling on Instagram and was like, I had worked out once a week with a trainer for a couple of years, but I wasn't doing actual like strength training, following a program. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this and like see, maybe I need to stop doing my Peloton 6 days a week. And which I loved and and cardio was so helpful, but it wasn't doing the changes to my body that I was expecting. And man, did strength training do that. I started with dumbbells and then, here's my cat, by the way. The cat just jumped up here. And then I got a barbell and then I bought, it was the squat rack for it. And then I started investing slowly in pieces of equipment. And felt amazing. I felt strong. I felt empowered. I felt it was like giving me that body composition that I was hoping would happen on the Peloton and it never did. And yeah, it just kind of all started to fall into place once I started to prioritize building muscle and just fueling my body versus trying to like restrict all the time.
Yeah, that's good. Now, when you decided to start sharing your uncluttering your life with just in the home and then, your fitness journey as well. And so your account keeps growing. When did you decide, because people were messaging you and asking for advice. So at what point did you say, hey, I can actually make a business out of this?
Right around the time that the last startup I was with was getting acquired and I had decided basically I was going to, move on. I gave them a long, like 6+ month notice so I could help with the transition and help them find someone to replace me. And as I was looking for opportunities, I had a consulting opportunity arise. And I thought to myself, this could be the best opportunity for me to take so that I can have some time to figure out what do I want to do. With consulting, it was billable hours. I had never had that before. So my max billable hours was 45 hours a week. Now that's a lot less than I had ever worked, even as a mom, working mom. So I was like, okay, I'll do this consulting job. And I still worked extremely hard for them. That was a great company I was with. I helped support them for about a year and a half. But because it was like, oh, I'm actually like billing hours, I didn't take it home mentally with me as much as I used to. Previously, with these other organizations, I felt like the weight of the company was on my shoulders from an HR standpoint. Like that, the employee relations, the growth of it, all of it, like that I was failing if they were failing. And like, for the first time ever, I've had like a separation because I was like, well, I recommended what I think they should do. Usually they agreed with me. If they didn't occasionally agree with me, it's their decision. I'm just here to consult. And that was like the most freeing thing. And so it freed me up time wise to start getting certification because I can just go coach, right? I know how to coach individuals from I've coached line level employees to business executives to CEOs, but there's a difference with do I actually know anything about nutrition? Right? I can't just tell them to do what I did. I need to actually know what to do from strength, from like a strength perspective. So I got multiple certifications from my personal certification training to a nutrition certification and then program design courses and a whole bunch of stuff. So I started doing that on the side. And then I just kind of put out there on Facebook that I said, hey, I'm going to take on part-time 5 clients. If anyone's interested, here's a Google form application. Let me know. And I quickly got back 5 right away and took them on, which was awesome. And to this day, 3, it was 4 until very recently, but 3 are still with me, which is awesome in some type of capacity. Yeah. Over 2 years later. And yeah. And so it kind of just took off. And then I did that for about 3-4 months. And then when January hit, I knew that my consulting job was wrapping up in the spring sometime in May or so. And I was like, okay, I really got to build this into a business. And I was loving it. I was loving the coaching. I was feeling so rewarded by it. It was amazing to be working with my clients, and to see their growth. And so I kind of like kicked it up a notch, and then I quickly grew to like 45 clients by like May.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then that's when I then wrapped up the consulting job. And now I've been full-time coaching ever since.
Wow. So how long has that been now?
Yeah. 2 years.
2 years. Man, good job.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Okay. Well, so I was going to ask, like, how uncomfortable was it to kind of leave, what you were familiar with? Because you were in the, in HR and then consulting, and then now you jump over to this. Was because you had such a rapid growth of clients, was there ever this fear or this worry of, I'm on my own now and I've got my kids and, there's something before was like a steady income?
I mean, I still feel that like every day. No, as a business owner, as like a single mom, like large financial responsibilities. No, it's definitely more stable now. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference between having a set income and set paycheck that just comes in every 2 weeks or every month when I was consulting to now, just having to look out at my clients and their renewal dates and, make sure I have that mapped out. And do I need to bring in new clients and obviously I had a lot of advantages transitioning into growing my own business. I've worked in software. So like that side of things, I love that and it's easy. So the back end, like the automations of onboarding clients and setting up for their payments and their client agreements to be signed and all the, the business entity, all of that, the tax side, my QuickBooks, that's the easy stuff for me. Like I was in HR, I was doing software all the time. So it was sales and marketing, right? Like, ooh, this is uncomfortable. I have to like sell myself on the internet. Like I used to just talk to my friends on the internet. It was like my Instagram page for fun. Now I have to like sell myself, like sell my services, and it's a personal brand. So I'm selling me. So that's been probably the piece I've had to get the most comfortable with and has felt the most kind of, most area of growth for me.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It is a little challenging to like put yourself out there when you're selling yourself. You can, maybe sell something completely different, but when it's yourself, it's a little different. Okay, so you had also mentioned several times that alcohol was something that you enjoyed and participated in for a while. And then what was it? About 4 years ago, you decided to give alcohol up completely. So why did you decide to do that? And then since giving up, what have you noticed? What differences have you noticed in your life?
Yeah. So alcohol, just to go back, it was a major part of my life. Like I didn't recognize it. I kind of thought that's just how everybody lived. I'll be honest. I knew there were some people, I have some family members who don't drink, but for the most part, I just thought that's how it was. So, from high school, college, 20s, into my early 30s, alcohol was a major part of my life, major part of my day to day. Now, I don't think I had a dependency issue. I don't think I, had, I wouldn't define myself as having a problem with alcohol, but it was just such a regular part of my life. That was how I socialized. That was how I unwinded at the end of the day. So I felt like I deserved that, multiple glasses of wine at night after the kids went to bed and after dealing with all the stuff that I had to deal with. I felt like I truly deserved it. So I do know that I have family and friends and people who are probably like, really? Like, this is amazing. Like, Lauren doesn't drink anymore. And I don't know, like, how it wasn't like one day I woke up and all of a sudden I was like, I can't, this has to change. This has to stop. I think it was an evolution of my health and wellness journey. At that point, I had my nutrition down pat. I had my workouts, like, were feeling amazing. And I still didn't feel great. Like, I still woke up feeling kind of like lethargic and groggy. I felt like I had brain fog. I just felt like tired and exhausted all the time. And you could be like, well, you're a busy single mom and, 30 in your 40s. That could just be, I don't know. It just felt like I was missing this one piece. And it was always like alcohol was that piece out there that I thought, oh, I don't have to tackle that because I do everything else, right? Like, look at me. I'm checking all the boxes over here. Like, so I get that. I get to keep that. And finally, when the pandemic hit, and I probably did the opposite because I think most people probably started drinking more when the pandemic hit. And I was home alone with two boys, and there were a couple of nights where I caught myself like, I have a bottle of wine myself. And I was like, wait a minute, like maybe I should just like experiment with like, what does it feel like to pull it back and to drink less? And what would that be like? And so I did. So I just stopped buying it. I stopped buying it for my house. And I used to buy wine by like the case. So like, this was a lot for me, right? To like, be like, I'm going to just stop buying it. And I did. I stopped buying it. And that seemed to be okay. I still was having alcohol socializing, but it was also like the weird like lockdown time. So there was like socialization was just weird then to begin with. But it was still part of my life. And then I will say I was in a pretty serious relationship at the time and with someone who did drink a lot more heavily than I was at that time as I was trying to cut back. And it did actually kind of become an issue in our relationship. More so, I think they weren't excited about a life with me without alcohol in it. And to be honest, I thought that could be a possibility for us to figure out and other things at play I won't get into. So anyways, when that relationship ended, it became a lot easier. All of a sudden I could try out socialization without having to have alcohol. And I tell my clients this all the time. It's almost like just reps at the gym. You got to just like put the reps in and practice it. If you've never gone to, out to dinner and not had a glass of wine or a cocktail, you have to like practice and do it and like see what it feels like and as uncomfortable as it is. And so I just did more and more of that. And what I realized was the longer stretches I went. So all of a sudden I'd go like a week without alcohol. Well, I felt great. Then I go 2 weeks. Then I went a month. Then I went a couple months. And all of a sudden it was like the longer I went, I was like, man, I feel so much better. Like I feel so much better. And this is the only thing that's really changed in that period. And I just kind of put it two and two together and was like, alcohol just really doesn't have a place in my life. Now, I will say I've had a cocktail or a glass of wine here and there in the past couple of years. Maybe the last one I had was in April. I was in North Carolina on vacation. I had a little glass of rosé, and then I felt like garbage. And my now boyfriend, he's like, "Really? Did you really feel like garbage from that little glass?" And he doesn't drink much at all, so it's not like he's trying to pressure me to drink. But he just was shocked. But it's amazing when you pull it back that you do. Like all of a sudden, it just hits you in a different way. So I've realized the less, it just doesn't really have a role for me in my day to day and doesn't add value. And I feel so much better since I've removed it. So given how much I used to drink before and where I'm at now, if anyone is ever considering like, what does that life look like? I just encourage them to just kind of experiment with it. And instead of it being like a hard and fast, like, I'm never going to do this again, or to just kind of experiment and see what that feels like.
Yeah, I like too how you said that just like, I mean, you can't just like rip the Band-Aid completely, just like try it. If you have never gone to a meal without a cocktail or a glass of wine, like, slowly try it and practice that. I think that that's really good advice. So, okay. So we're going to slowly wrap up, but you also shared with me that you decided to sell your home, kind of another way to unclutter your life. And it has truly allowed you to be more present as both a mother and a business owner, and how it goes against the American, the quote unquote American dream. So I want to know kind of I want to hear a little bit more about the decision to sell your house and why that has helped you unclutter your own personal life and has helped you with your business and your family.
Yeah. So I've been divorced now 7 years, and we were very fortunate when we were going through the divorce process, which we were able to do pretty quickly and very amicably, that we owned two homes. So we had a rental property with two units and then the single family. So it made it very easy. He kept the two family and I kept the single family, and they're actually right down the street from each other too. So it was very ideal situation for the kids, and worked out really well for both of us. So in that, now I have a home to keep up by myself. And I did for 7 years. I kept it up, and I'm not handy. He was the handy one, right? And he like loves that stuff too. So now without having that and, feeling like here I am, it's an old home to keep up. It was something major every single year. And it felt like it was just weighing on me. It was this past year, it was the roof. Literally, there was a massive hole in my roof. There was a windstorm and shingles fell off. I knew I needed a new roof, but the wind made that happen. And all of a sudden you could literally see from the attic you could touch your hand out and touch the sky. Literally, it was like this big, the whole.
Wow.
So I had to get a new roof. The year before that, it was the main drain sewer line, which the plumber tried to tell me that like, this is really great for resale value. And I'm like, no, people want to be able to flush toilets. This is a given. This is not going to help me with resale. But anyway, so it's something major like flooded basements, this, that. And I'm growing a business, right? Like I am trying to be present with my boys and keep up with my own wellness and then grow this new business. Being a business owner and having your own business, it's a whole different level of responsibility that I want to be able to put my time and attention into. And the home felt like was constantly this like burden. And I just grew to get really resentful of it. So I started like investigating places that, and I found a little place I liked here in town, and I looked at it 3 different times and throughout the year. And by the third time, the rates were really good. And I was like, all right, we're going to do this. And let me tell you, since that day I signed the lease to rent and be able to just put in a work order when there's something in the apartment has been the biggest relief ever. And I know it goes against everything. I've had so many family members and friends, and not like, in a judgmental way, but just be like, are you sure? Like that there's equity. There's so much equity in home ownership. That's what you do. Like you're going to price yourself out. Are you ever going to buy again in the town? And I had to just kind of let go of any of those fears and whatnot, because this is what feels right for me now. And probably until my boys go to college, I'll figure out that next phase at that point. And I think it just goes back to like this idea that like you have to trust yourself. You have to like just trust when your body's telling you something feels wrong or when it's telling you feels right, and to really like lean into that, and just not really care what other people think and do what's right for you regardless. And whether that was with changing careers, when people be like, are you crazy, Lauren? Like, you're going to give up being a chief people officer with equity in a, stock in a publicly traded company or whatever it is to, be a health coach online. And you have to do what's right for you, and letting go of that, like caring of what other people think or what their reaction is going to be, I think is a huge part of my journey and what I help try to support my clients on. Just do what's right for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's so huge because you, several times, like you had mentioned, that you had to make decisions that kind of went against the grain of like these job titles that, this identity that you could have had. I mean, you were HR personnel director, whatever rank you were for 20 years. And so having to get rid of that to do something that you were passionate about. And then, okay, now I'm no longer a homeowner, get rid of that. And other people are like, you're great. What are you thinking? But just the fact that you decided, no, this is not what is best for me, for my family, for my mental health, for my overall well-being. And like, it really, you doing these things goes exactly towards your mission of your business and you helping women unclutter their lives and making space for what matters. I'd love to also just kind of hear what are some of the key questions or strategies that you share to help clients discover what's most important as you have done for yourself. And then also use this time to share a little more about what people can expect when they receive coaching from you.
Yeah, I love that. The question on like what's most important, I think really comes down to like, what do you really value? And no judgment, whatever that is, right? Like, but finding out like, what are those things that you truly value? And I know people hate hearing it, but where you spend your time is what your priorities are. And if that isn't aligned with what you truly value, there's a big mismatch. And so having to like really unpack and figure out that. And so part of it is literally looking at their schedule. So when I have clients on board with me, I have them walk me through and answer a bunch of questions, but what's your weekday routine like? What's your weekend routine like from when you wake up to when you go to bed? How are you spending that time and what does it look like? And then all the other factors like your household family members, like, are they helping? Are they not? Like, what's the role they play in it? Like, what are the dynamics there? And then what are the things that stress you out? What are the things that bring you joy? And yes, we also talk about macros and squats and that too. But really digging into like how you're living your day to day is the key, because that's the key to being able to keep showing up for yourself every day. It's not some magical macro count. It's not some magical workout plan. Like, yes, all those things make it easier. Those are all practical tools. But I find that's not usually where clients need the most support. They need the most support on like coming up with strategies to make their day-to-day life easier and just flow. And so some of it's just walking through, figuring out how they're going to approach their week, helping them learn what tools may help them, whether that be time blocking, or stress management techniques or things that are going to help them be able to feel like they can show up. So a lot of women, most of my clients are 40 plus, and I have clients though from 30 to 71, and, they're all high achieving, really busy and really stressed out women, to be honest. So helping them come up with ways that it can make their day feel a bit lighter, feel a bit easier, where they can fit these things in. I think that's really the key. So we've hit 3 pillars with my work with clients one-on-one, or even I have some group programs as well. But we talk about like mindset as the first piece, and habits, and like, how do you actually, like, what does that look like? How do we build that day to day there? Then we tackle kind of, the nutritional approach that's going to work best for them. And then the activity piece, what's the right amount of activity and how do we kind of layer that in from where they're at now to where they want to go, and, have them on a path to that. Because a lot of it is like making sure that our expectations align with like the reality of like what we can actually do and what we can actually put in.
That sounds great. I mean, I think it's just like what you're doing is so important. And like you said, a lot of the clients that coming in, they're just stressed. They're stressed about their life. They don't know how to organize everything, like organize their life. And you're walking them through that. And then, yes, there's that health aspect, the physical health aspect. But like what you're doing is so much more than that. So I think that's really great that you discovered that was a necessity and you went forward with that. Well, Lauren, I want to ask you my last question that I love to ask all of my guests on the show, and so I'd love to hear what you'd have to say. So, for your story, you went to Cornell, had became very successful in your career at a very young age. Worked your way with that, and then decided to let it all go. In a way to pursue this business that was so important for you. And so oftentimes women are fearful of doing something like that. They may feel like they're too young to be able to do something as successful that you were able to do, or like they missed the mark in that they missed their chance. And so if you could encourage one woman who does feel blocked or limited to pursue a dream or a goal based on her age or a life circumstance, what would you say to her?
Yeah. I love this question. And I think that so many times we like to put things in a box, right? And so we like to have things packaged in a certain way that it makes sense. So when we think about like age and certain milestones, right? This is when this is supposed to happen. And part of that is just how we're raised through school, right? And certain milestones happen at certain ages. But then we kind of carry that with us through, into our adult years when it doesn't necessarily have to be that way anymore, right? Like we don't have these school-based milestones that are happening at certain ages. And we need to like let go of that and have this idea that like you are capable so much more than you realize. And at any age, when I have a client who starts with me and asks, is it too late? And they tell me they're 42. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I like what? And I'm like, you can build muscle in your 90s. Studies show us that you can change your habits at any age. Like, having a growth mindset is the key, and allowing yourself to have that growth mindset so you don't feel it's so fixed and you don't limit your beliefs, right? It usually all comes down to these stories that we tell ourselves. And that goes way back to childhood and trauma and things that we've experienced, right? And that's a whole nother topic that's slightly out of my scope, right? But knowing that and just being aware of that. And when we catch ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves. So if I had one piece of advice that I would say to like all the women out there who are, kind of feel that like, gosh, I kind of want to do something different, or I want to try something new, or, aren't sure about it, or feel like their age is impacted, whether that be that they feel too young or too old, right? Is to think about the way they talk to themselves and, those stories that they're telling themselves. Because the more you tell yourselves, the more you hear that over and over, that's going to become your reality. So if you can really work on editing the language of how you speak to yourself and the way that you, edit those stories. So like when you catch yourself having these moments of being like, like, oh my gosh, I'm addicted to sugar. Like I just can't stop eating sugar. I hear this all the time, right? From clients say that. Instead saying like, noticing that like, I'm really craving sugar at this time of day. Like even just the way we edit the language can make a little adjustment in it. And that's a small thing. But when we talk about bigger things that we tell ourselves, right? That like, I'm not worthy of this, or I'm not capable of this, or whatever it is, just being really aware of that. So that was my number one suggestion. Your age does not need to define you, and really consider how you speak to yourself and the words that you use. Because I think that's where you can have like massive growth in terms of like living the life that you really want to live.
That's so good. I'm like over here cheering, Lauren, this is great. And I really just love like edit the narrative, edit the story that you are writing for yourself or that you are telling yourself. I think that is absolutely 100% huge and true. Well, Lauren, share where people can find you and your website. And if they want to, book a call with you or anything, plug yourself away.
Yeah. My website is thislifeuncluttered.com. And on Instagram, I'm at thislifeuncluttered. You can reach me at both places. And I have multiple ways to work together. You can just drop me a note on Instagram if you want to chat, and I can help you figure out what might be the best way to do that.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, I appreciate you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom as well. So thank you for joining me on the More Than Your Age podcast.
Erica, thank you so much. And what an amazing platform you have here to bring on so many women. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
I appreciate that. It's really a pleasure of mine. Thank you. If you were encouraged by today's episode, like and subscribe to this podcast and share this episode with a friend. You can find me on Instagram at More Than Your Age and visit the More Than Your Age Facebook page. Keep striving for your goals, live fully, and we'll catch you next time on the More Than Your Age podcast.